The river does not flow with water anymore. It flows with a thick, syrupy darkness that hums with the vibration of 1,000 dying bees. Beneath the shattered remains of the Argonne's weeping willows, the mud has become a living thing, a hungry slurry that drags at our boots like the hands of the damned. We were the 369th, the Harlem Hellfighters. They told us the French gave us their helmets because we were brave, but tonight I think they gave them to us so our brains wouldn't scatter when the sky turned inside out. The air is heavy, tasting of copper and something sweet, like rotting peaches dipped in vinegar. This is not the mustard gas the Germans used to throw at us. This is something from the spaces between the stars, a vibrant, pulsing emerald vapor that doesn't just burn your lungs, it invites itself in. My name is Langston Reed. I am a corporal in a war that no longer has a name. To my left, Sergeant Big Joe Henderson is a mountain of wet wool and defiance, his eyes reflecting the sickly green glow that is slowly consuming the horizon. We are pinned against the Meuse River, the water hissing as the glowing spores land on the surface. We expected a German counteroffensive. We got an extinction. The first cloud hit us at midnight. It didn't roll in like a fog, it descended like a curtain of glowing dust. Within seconds the screaming started. It wasn't the scream of a man hit by shrapnel. It was the sound of a body being rewritten. I saw Private Eli fall. He choked on a lungful of that green dust, and as he hit the mud, I watched in paralyzed horror as emerald mushrooms sprouted from his eye sockets in seconds. Then came the wires. Thin, metallic filaments like piano wire made of liquid obsidian, threaded their way out of his pores, stitching his uniform to his skin, pulling his limbs into jagged, unnatural angles. Eli. Big Joe whispered, his shotgun lowered for a heartbeat. Eli didn't answer. He didn't even breathe. He just twitched. Then, with a sound of snapping bone and wet canvas, he stood up. His head tilted at a 90-degree angle, his eyes now two glowing emerald lanterns. He wasn't Eli anymore. He was a spore husk, a puppet made of meat and alien geometry. And he wasn't the only one. Hundreds of our brothers, men we had shared tobacco and stories with just an hour ago, were rising from the mud of the Meuse, their hands ending in sharpened, metallic talons. Fix bayonets. Biolo knives out. Big Joe roared, his voice breaking the spell of terror. If they ain't breathe, they ain't brothers. Send 'em back to the dirt. The first wave hit us like a tidal wave of rot. I didn't use my Springfield. The bolt was jammed with the thick, sticky fungus that was growing over everything. I pulled my Biolo knife, a heavy, curved piece of American steel that felt warm and honest in my hand. A husk that used to be a French liaison officer lunged at me, its jaw unhinged, spraying a cloud of infectious spores from its throat. I swung with every ounce of my fear. The blade bit deep into the creature's neck, but instead of red blood, a pressurized spray of glowing blue ichor erupted, singeing the sleeves of my tunic. The thing didn't die. It didn't even slow down. I had to hack 3 more times, my blade grating against the metallic wires inside its throat, before the head finally tumbled into the muck. The tower. Look at the river. In the center of the Meuse, the water was boiling. A gargantuan structure, 300 feet tall and shaped like a nightmare's version of a lily, was tearing its way out of the riverbed. It was organic, pulsing with a deep, rhythmic violet light, and as the petals at the top opened, a massive geyser of emerald spores shot into the atmosphere, seeding the wind. It was a factory. A harvester. And we were the raw material. We gotta blow that thing, Oaks. Big Joe yelled, slamming another shell into his trench gun. If that cloud hits the reserves in the rear, the whole world turns into a garden of ghosts. Oh. We can't swim through that soup. I pointed to the river, which was now a glowing vortex of alien sludge. The bridge. The old stone bridge still stands. If we can get a satchel charge to the central pillar, we drop the tower and the bridge on top of M. We moved. We didn't run, we fought for every inch of the riverbank. The husks were everywhere, dragging themselves out of the water, their metallic wires clinking like 1,000 wind chimes in a hurricane. I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder, a talon had grazed me. I looked down and saw the green mold already beginning to fuzz over the wound. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't have much time. Cover me, I screamed. I grabbed the satchel charge, 20 pounds of high-grade TNT, and sprinted for the bridge. The world was a chaotic strobe light of muzzle flashes and emerald glows. I saw Sergeant Henderson go down, 3 husks tearing at his legs. He didn't scream. He pulled the pin on a grenade and took the monsters with him in a bloom of orange fire that looked pathetically small against the alien green. I reached the bridge. The stone was covered in a thick vibrating moss that tried to grab my boots. I climbed down to the central pillar, the roar of the spore tower above me sounding like 1,000 jet engines. The air was so thick with spores I could barely see my own hands. My vision was beginning to tint green. The fungus was in my eyes now. I jammed the satchel charge into a crack in the ancient stone. I didn't have a timer. I didn't have a long fuse. All I had was a cigar and a match. "For New York," I whispered, my voice sounding hollow and metallic. I struck the match. The flame was orange, a beautiful human orange. I touched it to the short fuse and turned to run, but a metallic wire wrapped around my ankle. I fell hard, my face hitting the vibrating moss. I looked back and saw Eli, or what was left of him, holding on to me. His emerald eyes were inches from mine. "Rest, Eli," I said, and I kicked him with my free boot, the heavy heel crushing the glowing fungus of his face. I lunged forward, diving into a shallow shell hole just as the world disappeared. The explosion wasn't a sound, it was a physical weight that pressed me into the earth. The stone bridge groaned and buckled, the ancient masonry collapsing into the river. The spore tower, stripped of its anchor, began to tilt. As the stone fell, it sliced through the organic stock of the alien structure. A massive eruption of blue fire and emerald gas filled the valley, a shockwave that flattened every tree within 3 miles. The silence that followed was absolute. I pulled myself out of the mud an hour later. The green fog was dissipating, the spores dying without their mother tower. The river was quiet, filled with the rubble of the bridge and the black, shriveled remains of the alien plant. I looked at my shoulder. The fungus had stopped growing. The emerald glow was gone, replaced by a dull, dead gray. I looked around for the rest of the 369th. There were no voices, no whistles. Just the sound of the Meuse River, finally flowing with water again, washing away the blue ichor and the emerald dust. I was the only thing left moving in the Argonne. I sat on a blackened stump and pulled out my harmonica, my fingers trembling. I didn't play a song of victory. I played a low, morning blues for the men who became the garden. The sun began to rise over the horizon, a pale, weak light that struggled to pierce the smoke. It wasn't green. It was the same sun that rose over Harlem, the same sun that had seen 1,000 wars and would see 1,000 more. I stood up, slung my empty Springfield over my shoulder, and began the long walk back to a world that would never believe what happened on the banks of the Meuse. The mud is finally still. The wind carries the scent of pine and wet earth. The stars are just stars again, cold and distant and silent. The darkness of the forest swallows the last of the green light, leaving only the gray ash of a war that humanity won, but at a price that can never be tallied on a ledger. I walk south and I do not look back at the river.